That's carried. Thank you. Could we move to item 24, because I'd like to get the two submissions to the Environment Canterbury dealt with as quickly as possible. Does anyone have any particular questions? You've all got the new format of the submission on the LTP. You've all got that. So I'd like to move it. Do I have a seconder for it? Andrew? Is there any discussion?
Look, just a suggestion on page 280, number 5, and I know we've got this elsewhere, but under air quality, I wonder if we could bring in the electrifying the buses into there, perhaps, because that actually will help a great deal on air quality, even if we cut and paste from where we've got it in transport.
I think that should go into the
transport.
Into the transport one.
Yeah, but I think it should go in both.
Why? In their LTP, they're not considering it in their LTP. I mean, look. I mean, this has been my point about the process. The process is A about C. If to just to put it mildly, and that is because ECAN's now in a position where it is financially stretched as far as the public transport goes, and so they've put on their LTP a proposal to save money, and there are different ways that they've proposed it, but the cutting and dicing doesn't look like a full range of options, because they all involve cutting routes and reducing the subsidy that's available to people with disabilities. So, you know, it's I just feel quite strongly that we need to deal with that one issue separately. It's okay, but it is absolutely for the regional public transport planning process, absolutely 100%. Yanni,
just two sort of changes and one just suggestion for the formatting. I'll start with that. I think it'd be really good just to separate out the recommendations. So just have an attachment that said, here's the recommendations, and just have it numbered, so it's really easy to see how they respond to each request for the things that we've asked for. The other thing is that just in regards to air quality, I think the second bullet point, acknowledging their regional leadership, while at the same time we're sort of saying that, you know, they need to increase responsiveness. And if you look at the community board's submission, is that going to be attached, or is that just being deleted now?
It wasn't planning on being attached to the submission.
Sorry?
It wasn't going to be attached with the submission.
Right, because I mean, you can see from some of the boards, the feedback around air quality has been quite significant, and I was quite happy with that being put in, but it's been taken out. So I just think we shouldn't be, I don't think we should be letting them off the hook for the lack of monitoring around things like the pollution hotline or the dust issues. I think we should be stronger on that. And I think the final point in that regard, the request that's been put in at the bottom around the ensuring the conditions of consent for discharge provide for adequate monitoring and response to complaints, that was a specific request to change their charging policy so that those who were applying for the consent were being asked to contribute more to the monitoring of it. So that was a kind of, I'm not quite sure the exact phrasing, but they have a finance policy that talks about how they weigh up the general versus the private benefit, and that's what really needs to be changed, so that the companies like Living Earth, who generate a huge amount of time, should be having to put in more towards dealing with the air quality issues that they're creating.
Maybe an additional sentence that picks up that the ECAN should look at the balance of where whether they can charge more or a higher proportion of the costs associated with enforcing consents to the consent holders. Is that?
We can add that section.
Yeah,
It was by putting in that ensuring that conditions of consent for discharges provide for adequate monitoring and response to complaints. It was the resourcing of that.
So
that's what that was intended to convey.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a really good chart on page, I don't know what page it is. There's a table of summary of funding policies around air quality and non-domestic emissions. It's got, you know, current policy is 40% UAGC, a 60% targeted rate, and then it's got X on exacerbated pays and X on user beneficiary pays principle. Well, it just seems crazy to me that they would just be basically letting these companies off the hook who generate a huge cost. So I think the more specific we can be, the more chance of success.
Is that okay to pick that up as a
Yep, we
wording?
can pick that up and put an additional sentence in.
Cool.
Thank you.
And a summary at the front of the document. Yep.
Sorry to raise it again, just because I'm not sure that we've picked it up or whether it's appropriate that it goes in this or in some other thing, but the whole thing of issuing consents for water for a really long period of time and then not reviewing them. I thought we were going to add that, but I may be reading the wrong copy, but I can't find it.
So I think that what we've put in under the section on water, so the second last bullet point there, we've suggested that the review of the regulatory framework for considering change of use for water consents is brought forward, and there's provision of adequate funding to enable robust statutory processes to protect freshwater resources. So we've put an additional wording in there around that.
A wee bit subtle.
It's quite direct around change of use.
Okay. I just think we should be incredibly direct about that and make it very clear that we don't know what's going on sufficiently with our water supply to allow these uses to just run on for 35 years regardless. But I mean, you've been very polite about it.
It's so considering change of use for water consents from the aquifers. It's the aquifers that we're talking about, not the rivers.
It's the Capitone example to
it
give
It is the Capitone example that's driven this. I think in terms of the Resource Management Act and the documents that manage the taking and use of water, it's when those are reviewed that council can make much more direct submissions.
I totally agree, but we don't know when that is.
But the long-term plan is probably not the best place to have that discussion.
It isn't, but
I'm
I think
totally aware of
that the signal...
So yeah, here it's about funding that review and the process of looking after the water resource. That's what the long-term plan can address.
Do we know when they are going to review that? Do you know, Helen?
No, we don't. But what we've done here is suggest it's brought forward.
Okay, Anne?
I just have just a point of clarification, actually. Something that Yanni said about attaching the community board submission into ours. Is that something that we could or should do? Like, for example, we've got a really good submission coming through our community board about the bus routes, and because the community board is really council, would that add weight, or can that be included?
One of the challenges with attaching the community board submissions as they are is that you get a lot of duplication, and I think it loses its focus. So incorporating the feedback from the community boards in a single council submission, I think is a stronger way of doing it.
Cool, thank you.
All right, so this has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Yanni?
I mean, just I do feel a little bit concerned about not attaching the community board submissions, given that we asked them to do all that work on them. I know at a high level some of those points have been incorporated, but I still think it's. I just wonder whether what the harm is of actually attaching them, and given that we want to strengthen community boards and we've asked them to feed it back, I personally would be, happy to include those as information to ECAN if that was possible. But I think it's good that we're making a submission. I think, water, air, public transport are really key issues, as is biodiversity, and it's really important, I just think, in regards to the air quality, that we do ask for ECAN to be much more responsive than what they've currently been, because people in the community are feeling very let down with the way in which things have been responded to, whether it's the quarries, whether it's the odours. So I look forward to ECAN embracing our submission.
I just wanted to comment on the situation that we find ourselves in, where Environment Canterbury sort of really forced into a position where the funding is insufficient for them to, I mean, they've got no reserves left to draw on with respect to their public transport. They've exhausted all of those, and as a result, we've ended up in the situation where they are looking to cut routes. By July, we will be considering the regional public transport plan. In its initial stage, it will go out for public consultation. People will have an absolute ability to have a say over the plan, and then the individual routes will be consulted on, and that is a process that will take place within a year. It will take effect within 2 years of this decision. I just think it's absolutely crazy to cut routes before, just ahead of a process that is going to potentially offer solutions to the communities that are affected by the cuts. Our staff have worked really hard with ECAN staff behind the scenes to look at using some of the other routes in order to extend services, perhaps not on every bus trip, but so I'm really confident that we could find solutions if we had the time. And it's unfortunate that ECAN didn't put any of those options, but just simply, these are the unfinancial routes, so let's just cut them off the list. So thank you, councillors. I'm hoping for support for the Environment Canterbury long-term plan submission, and I'm hopeful that our submission will add weight to those of the communities that have been affected by the proposed changes, or would be affected by the proposed changes, and I'm hoping that we can find a happy solution that means that those services aren't cut. So on that point, I shall put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's